Hey everybody, in this video I'm going to do something which I had been very reluctant to do so for a long while, but a lot of people were interested in this. So I'm going to do this, and that is a full day of eating. So why was I reluctant to record a video like this? Well, it's because in general I just don't find that it adds too much value to anybody, like watching someone as they're eating their meals. How is that useful? I generally much more so prefer to talk about principles behind nutrition and perhaps my reasoning behind selecting one food over another. But I still understand that it was interesting for perhaps some people to see what I'm eating in any given day and how my meals look like, because probably many of you know about me doing some weird food experiments in the past. Probably a lot of you know that I did a carnivore diet experiment for almost 2 months. And you may also know that these days I'm still eating kind of in a carnivorous way, but I still have some carbs. So, I get it that it's interesting for people to see how the hell does that look like in practice. So, I'm going to do this video, but I'm not going to show you as I'm eating my meals, because trust me, my meals are pretty ugly. I'm not really a chef, but I'm going to show you what I am going to have in each of my meals, and I guess you'll just have to take my word for it that I'm actually going to eat those meals. So first of all, I just quickly want to talk you through the general structure behind my day-to-day nutrition. So I typically have 4 meals a day. I just found that to be a really nice sweet spot in terms of meal frequency. And I have my first meal at around 9:30, maybe 10 at the most. And I typically wake up at around 8 o'clock. I have a couple of things that I get out of the way right upon waking, and it just comes out that way all the time that I get to my first meal at around 9:30. At this point, I'm approximately 13, maybe 14 hours after my final meal the day before. So at this point, I have a pleasant, not overwhelmingly crazy amount of hunger, but just a nice, pleasant hunger, which, just makes your meals more rewarding and enjoyable. So that's my first meal at around 9:30. Then typically after this, not long after this, I will have my training session, and somewhere between 1 and 2 o'clock, I will have my next meal, and my third meal will be sometime around 4:30, 5 p.m. maybe, and then I will have something smaller between 7 and 8 p.m. So that would be a pretty typical day of eating. In terms of calories and macros, these days, honestly, I have not the slightest clue how many calories I'm eating in any given day. When I was eating more so a carb-based diet, then I would have been able to tell it more intuitively. Now that I'm eating a more of a protein and fat-based diet with some carbs, I honestly don't know. Now, given my activity levels and given the fact that I'm pretty weight stable, I would guess that I'm eating around 3,000 calories a day. Every once in a while, when I see that my skin is getting kind of tighter and I'm getting a bit hungrier, I guess during those times I'm dipping a bit under, and I would approach the 2,500 calorie mark. And then if I'm not hungry ever and I'm just feeling full all the time and also seeing myself getting a bit softer, then probably then I'm hovering around 3,500 calories or something. So I'm just kind of looking at these bodily cues, and based on that, I'm prioritizing more of the calorie dense stuff and loading up on those more so, or I'm just doing the opposite and loading more up on leaner foods. So that's on the calorie side of things. In terms of fats and carbs, I found that I did really well on a fully carnivorous approach, so eating 0 carbs. When I was done with that 6-ish week experiment, then I moved back to eating a more so carb-based diet. But I really quickly started to miss the cognitive and energy stability that a carnivorous approach gave me. So, and as well as the, stomach and digestion integrity, the flat stomach at all times and none of the bloating and, weird stuff digestively. So I quickly kind of went back to eating a protein and fat-based diet, but I also found over time that still having some carbs at least just has a nice way of boosting my mood every once in a while, as well as just getting me a nice acute energy boost, which can of course be handy every once in a while. So over time, I gravitated to have a carnivorous base, and on top of that, having some carbs. I think that if you have the mindset of trying out a carnivorous diet and over time still wanting to have some carbs, and then you're trying to have the mindset of, okay, I'm just going to have as many carbs as I can get away with, I think that's a completely reasonable approach. Me personally, just because I enjoy some of the benefits of eating a protein and fat-based diet so much, I actually have the mindset of eating as little carbs as possible and still get the benefits of having some carbs. So I'm almost using carbs medicinally at this point. But, this is just how I'm doing things right now, and it may change in the future. And I still have some days which are 100% carnivore, but I also have days which are a bit more dominant in carbs. And I would say that this is kind of the advanced stage of eating quote unquote intuitively or ad libitum, or, eating without tracking macros and calories, that you almost gain an intuition as to what your body needs in any given day or in any given meal. So some days I just wake up and I feel all day like, man, just give me more of the fatty, protein-rich, salty stuff. And on other days I feel like I need that acute energy boost from the carbs. So that's just how it goes. And maybe it has to do with my activity levels. Maybe it has to do with how hard I'm training. It's hard to pinpoint exactly, but that is just my experience lately. So with all of that out of the way, let's get to the actual meal. So in this first meal, I'm going to have some eggs. I'm going to have 3 or 4, let's say 4. I typically have 3 or 4 eggs in any given meal. Why 3 or why 4? How do I decide? I just freestyle it and just kind of make the decision on the fly. So I have 4 of these. I will also get this super aesthetic ground beef stuff. Looks really beautiful. For example, on this one, I have no idea what the macros are because they just don't list it. I saw some products like this earlier and they said that they were approximately 200 to 250 calories per 100 gram. And I think the fat content is approximately 20-ish grams per 100 gram. So I will have some of these and I won't measure out anything. I will just freestyle it completely and just intuitively put some of this in the frying pan. And then I will also have some bacon. You gotta live a little. Also, well, probably this does list the macros, but this is one of those retarded stuff which gives it in kilojoules. I think you have to divide it by 4.2 to get the calories. So most bacon products are around 300, 350 calories per 100 gram, and they have about 30 to 35 grams of fat per 100 gram. Again, I'm not going to measure out. I'm just going to pick a few slices, put them in the frying pan, and that will be that. And that actually concludes meal 1. So typically in the first meal, I never have any carbs. I just don't seem to crave or want them in the first meal. And having some nice protein and fat rich meal upon waking just gives me a nice boost of energy for the next several hours. And it gives a nice kickstart of the day. So that will be meal 1. Right now it's around 10 a.m. I delayed my meal a little bit because I wanted to look at least presentable in front of the camera. So see you for meal 2 at around 1:30 or so. Okay, so back with meal 2. Today I'm going to have my training session a little bit later. So I'm kind of going to have something small and I will have some carbs in this one. And this is going to be a very, very simple meal. No cooking required, luckily. And I'm going to have this amazing, already opened, not super aesthetic cottage cheese sort of product. Funny story that I have about this one. So this is a full fat kind of product, but when I first came to Macedonia, which was in the winter of 2017, so a good year and a half ago, then I found this one in the grocery store and it said 66 calories. So I was like, cool. I found my dairy of choice here because I was following kind of a low fat diet at the time. And then I looked at the macros after I already served out a good like 300-400 grams of it for myself to eat. I was already like midway through the meal and then I saw the macros saying like 12 grams of fat, 15 grams of protein, and like 4 grams of carbs. And then I was like, oh my God, these bastards miswrote the calories. So I was like devastated. God damn it, I blew the deficit for today. Funny thing is that when I was doing my interview with Lyle McDonald in 2017, that I actually talked about this experience of mine. It was a massive drama. But regardless, these days, luckily, it's not a problem because the fats are very much welcomed from this dairy source. So I will have this and I will have it with some strawberries. Funny thing about the macros actually as well, when I came here it said 43 calories per 100 gram and now it says 33 calories per 100 gram. It's like, man, if I knew that before, then I would have eaten so much of this before. But anyway, so I'm typically just putting it in a bowl like this. I'm going to show my master chef skills here. Like this. So just kind of intuitively filling it up. Typically I go through like 1 or 2 boxes of these a day and it's like 300 grams. Honestly, strawberries are my favorite carb source these days because my gut generally tolerates them pretty well and the way I'm responding to it in terms of energy fluctuations is really nice. So that's what I'm going to have. I'm going to have some cocoa powder with it. I don't really do sweeteners these days because I kind of learned to appreciate the natural sweetness of fruits upon eating a protein and fat-based diet for the most part, which is of course pretty bland. So your taste receptors kind of resensitize to less intense sweetness over time. So that's what I'm going to have for meal 2 and see you with meal 3 in a couple of hours. All right, back for meal 3. Just got back from the gym, and on the way home I hopped into a grocery store, and I'm gonna show you in a minute what I bought. But first of all, I just want to quickly touch on the training side of things, since I didn't do a training update this week yet. To be honest, there is not much new things to talk about. I'm still in the myo-rep phase, so high rep work for the most part. I'm gradually increasing weight from session to session. And so far, the interesting thing is that I was still able to get the same amount of reps on all sets, on all exercises, upon increasing the weight by about 5% on average. And the idea otherwise would be to gradually drop the reps as the weight increases. And over time, at the point where you are not able to hit a certain amount of reps, then you're transitioning away from myo reps and start doing straight sets and cluster sets and focusing more on the heavy mechanical load type of stimulus in your training. But probably in my case, this point will come about a little bit later, because I was still able to get the same amount of reps. This week was the first time when on a couple of exercises, such as Romanian deadlifts, also on leg pull downs, I believe, I was only able to get like 13, 14 reps. So maybe on a couple of exercises, I will get to the mechanical loading phase a bit quicker than on other exercises. But we will see how this all pans out. But it should be flexible. It's not a huge issue. But that's really the only thing notable this week. In the training footage that I will be playing in the sideline here, you will only be seeing me showing this really cool micro loadable ankle weight. So you can just strap this onto the barbell, dumbbell, or machine that you're using, which can be handy if the weight jumps in those machines or dumbbells are a bit too high for gradual progression. So this is a micro loadable ankle weight, and it has these little metal implements that you can plug in. Each of them weighs about 100 grams, and it's a really handy way to microload the microload itself. And you can also see me gracefully chasing away a gym buddy that I ran into in the gym and interrupted me in the middle of a myo rep set. That's just something you have to do every once in a while. Real quickly, I want to dispel a couple of misunderstandings that I came across upon talking to some people and also engaging in some conversations in the Sustainable Self-Development Facebook group. So the first misunderstanding is about myo reps. So a lot of people seem to think that myo reps are synonymous with training to grinding failure on all sets and just completely obliterating yourself. And that's actually not the case at all. You can be training relatively submaximally and still make myo reps work. So you could be doing a set of 15, leave 1, 2, 3, even 4 reps in the tank and still make myo reps work. So you could be doing a set of 15 pretty submaximally, take a couple of deep breaths, and then do a set of 3 to 5, a couple of deep breaths again, do a set of 3 to 5 again. You may have to accumulate a bit more volume to get to that point when that muscular fatigue and the effective reps kick in, which we are actually targeting with myo reps, but you will get there eventually. And really, it's not an issue if you're not training to complete failure all the time. And it really is just a method of making high rep work and high rep sets a bit more time efficient. So instead of doing 3, 4, 5 sets of 15 or something and taking 3 to 5 minutes to get that done, you can get the same thing done within 1 or 2 minutes. That really is the point of myo reps, and it doesn't necessarily have to mean just completely killing yourself with grinding failure training all the time. So that's one quick thing I want to address. The other thing I want to touch on is a misunderstanding with regards to load progression, which we talk a lot about in the context of this SSD training program and just in general when we discuss our training philosophies in the Sustainable Self-Development Facebook group. So we like to talk about how we prioritize load progression as opposed to trying to accumulate more and more sets in your training and more volume that way. And a lot of people seem to think that load progression is synonymous with pushing yourself to training with maximal intensities and maximal weights all the time. And a lot of people say when we talk about prioritizing load progression instead of accumulating more and more sets that, man, like how is that sustainable? You're just going to get injured and burnt out even more quickly if you're pushing for maximal intensities all the time. But we're actually not talking about pushing for maximal intensities. We are simply talking about gradually increasing the load in the bar and over time lifting more weights for a given amount of reps. That's it. And guess what? That is the focus of all training programs, no matter how much they are prioritizing volume progression and adding more and more sets into your regimen. Increasing the load on the bar gradually over time is always going to be the focus of any training program that was ever effective. It's just a way of approaching your training and a different way of phrasing what you're focusing on. So we say that As long as loads are gradually increased, then you shouldn't be stressing over accumulating more and more sets over time. And another training program might approach it from the opposite angle and say you should be primarily focused on accumulating more and more volume and more working sets. And besides that, you should also be increasing the load. But load progression is definitely not the same as pushing for maximal intensities. And I think that the idea that load progression is inherently injurious or is just going to lead to more burnout or something like that is definitely a bit misplaced. So that's on the training front, and quickly I want to talk about meal 3, which is super exciting, the post-workout meal, every lifter's favorite meal of the day. So just hopped into this grocery store in the nearby and bought some more eggs, which I'm going to have in this meal, and I just ran out of. I also bought some mussels, which are really cheap, and they're an awesome way to get some lean protein. And I also have some salmon in my fridge, which I'm not going to show you because it's already opened up and is a little bit gross. So I'll have some seafood with some eggs. You can kind of see why I'm not showing you the actual meal. Like, can you imagine how ugly it is when it's all thrown together? And besides that, I'll also have that dairy, cottage cheese, Greek yogurt, whatever, who the hell knows what that is, with some strawberries. So probably this is the most caloric meal of the day. My post-workout meal is not always the most caloric, but this is just how it came out today because I didn't eat a lot in my previous meals. And I also bought some dry white wine. I'm not going to have this in this meal. I'm going to have it later this evening, just a glass or two with my girlfriend who's going to come over to watch some comedy series, probably Friends. I never watched Friends, as unbelievable as that sounds. So we are still at season 1. I'm not sure how this wine is going to help in the way of muscle gains, but it definitely is going to help in the way of soul gains and making comedy series more enjoyable. So that's about it. And see you soon for meal 4. All right, folks, back for meal number 4. This is the final meal of the day. It's about 7:30 right now. So I won't be going crazy on food in this meal because, frankly, I feel quite well fed from everything that I've eaten today. So it's going to be pretty protein dominant with at least some fat in it. So I will have some chicken, some of these prosciutto stuff, and some more of these mussels that I bought today. And that's going to be it. We won't be staying in tonight, contrary to what I said earlier. It looks like we will go out tonight. Maybe we will have some drinks, maybe not. We will meet in a park, so maybe we will just take a walk and then come back home. A couple of things that you may be wondering about. For example, you saw me eating now these prosciuttos. Earlier, you saw me eating some bacon and some ground beef. So you might be thinking that I'm eating a lot of processed meat. In general, that's not the case. In general, I tend to prefer more wholesome meat and seafood products with some eggs. But every once in a while, I just make it more convenient for myself. You might also be wondering whether I eat things like nuts and cheese and dark chocolate. The answer is yes. Every once in a while, I use them as condiments, especially like to have those foods when I'm on the go. If I'm in the office or if I'm traveling or something, then they're just really nice to just grab and eat them on the go and have some good satisfying nutrition in. One thing I forgot to mention is that I won't be having any fruits or any kind of plant foods in this final meal. I just personally find that I tend to be more bloated and just kind of get gassy if I eat fibrous stuff in the evening. Maybe it has to do with the fact that I'm moving more during the day and that helps to process stuff and bring down bloating and stuff like that. But that's just a hypothesis. I'm really not sure what to make of that. So guys, hopefully this was informative. In case you care about adding together the macros and everything that I've eaten, if you're curious about my caloric intake, let's just try to recall everything that I ate today together. So I had 6 eggs, I had 3 or 4 slices of bacon. I will now have probably like maybe 50 grams of this prosciutto stuff. I'm not sure what the macros are. Approximately 200 calories per 100 gram. I'll have maybe 200 grams of this chicken. I had about 200 grams of salmon, maybe a bit less. I had about 400 grams of that full-fat cottage cheese. I had about 500 grams of strawberries. And what else did I have? In total, I will have about 400 grams of these mussels. And I think that's that. So that was my full day of eating today. Some days, as I said, I'm eating more. Some days I'm eating less. This was, in terms of energy intake, a pretty prototypical day for me, I would say. So hopefully you found all of this informative and you enjoy this content. If you did, then subscribe to support this channel, check out the Sustainable Self-Development Facebook group, and check out sustainableselfdevelopment.com for our upcoming training product, which will be out in a week, which is pretty freaking exciting. So that's all I had to say, guys. See you next time.